You've got to be kidding me, my mom snapped, her tone razor sharp. Madison is the one who's always thinking about us. Why would you try to take that away from her? I froze, mouth slightly open, as Madison, poised comfortably on the edge of the couch, gave me that smug little smirk she wore so well. The kind that twisted my stomach into knots. My name is Samantha Myers. I'm 29, a marketing consultant, and, if you ask most people, the dependable one. The quiet problem solver. The one who gets things done without making a scene. That's probably why, a few months ago, I quietly left $10,000 in cash in my parents' mailbox. No note, no name, just a gesture to ease their financial stress. The only person I told was my younger sister, Madison, a struggling artist with a flair for drama and a lifelong talent for stealing the spotlight. I never imagined she'd turn around and claim the money as her own. At first, I let it go. I figured she'd confess, or that it would blow over. But instead, it snowballed. Every family dinner, every phone call, came with more praise for Madison. She's so generous. We're so proud of her. I sat there smiling politely, burning with frustration while she soaked in the applause. It wasn't about the recognition. It was the lie. And the worst part? I couldn't prove a thing. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, no receipts. Just cash in an envelope, like I'd planned it that way on purpose. Because I had. I thought I'd be okay staying silent. But tonight, something in me broke. The lies had gone too far. So I said it. Right in the middle of Sunday dinner. Actually, I'd said, trying to keep my voice calm, I'm the one who left the money. The room went still. Eyes turned to me like I'd just flipped the table over. And Madison? She blinked once, her face painted in faux shock, so convincingly hurt you'd think I was the one who had betrayed her. My mom jumped in immediately, voice hard and full of disbelief. Samantha, don't do this. We all know it was Madison. Why would you try to take that away from her? My dad nodded with a frown. There's no need to turn this into some kind of contest. And Madison? Oh, she was brilliant. Her voice trembled like she was about to cry. I can't believe you'd say that, Sam. I know we've had our issues, but this? I never expected this. She looked at our parents, eyes shining, practically inviting their arms around her. And of course, they leaned right in, reassuring her, comforting her, while I sat there stunned. I clenched my fists beneath the table, trying to steady my breath. This isn't about one-upping anyone, I said, looking directly at Madison. I just want the truth out. I left that money in the mailbox. You knew that. You know it wasn't yours to claim. She held my gaze for a heartbeat too long, then looked away like she was the victim of some cruel attack. It was infuriating, watching her lie through her teeth and seeing them believe every word. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Madison shook her head, her face painted with disbelief and just enough pity to make my blood boil. She looked at me like I was pathetic, like I'd just embarrassed myself in front of the whole class. You don't even have proof, Sam, she said, her voice soft, sugary, and cutting all at once. Why would you leave cash like that? That's not even like you. Honestly, it feels like you're just trying to ruin this because you're jealous. Her words hit like a slap. And when I glanced at my mom, I saw it, the flicker of doubt. She frowned, lips pursed, as if Madison actually had a point. That's when I knew, it didn't matter what I said. They'd already decided who the golden child was. My mom let out a long sigh, the kind that made me feel 12 again. Samantha, this jealousy is exhausting. Madison has always gone out of her way for us, and instead of being happy or proud, you try to tear her down. It's really disappointing. Dad chimed in with his usual patronizing calm. We love you, honey. Even if you didn't contribute financially, you don't need to compete with your sister. This isn't a contest. He gave me a smile that was supposed to be reassuring, but it just felt like pity, like he was patting a dog on the head for trying to sit still. And there was Madison, sitting perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, lips pressed in a practiced expression of wounded innocence. She looked hurt, sure, but beneath it, I saw it, the glint of smug satisfaction. It felt like a nightmare. Like I was living in a bad family drama where the truth didn't matter and the villain got the applause. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping harshly across the tile. The sound silenced the room. "You know what?" I snapped, my voice unsteady with everything I'd been holding back. "This is ridiculous. You're so wrapped up in your fantasy of who Madison is that you can't even consider the idea that she might not be telling the truth. One day, you'll see it, and by then, it'll be too late." I turned to her, the hurt boiling over. "And you," I said, pointing straight at her, "one day you're going to need someone. You'll want someone to trust, someone to stand by you, and you'll realize you burned the only bridge that actually mattered." None of them said a word. I didn't wait for a reaction. I grabbed my bag, walked out, and slammed the door behind me. I wasn't going to stand there and let them turn me into some jealous liar. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. My relationship with my parents grew colder, quieter. The usual texts became fewer. Calls turned into awkward check-ins, like we were distant relatives keeping up appearances. And Madison? Nothing. Not a word. And honestly, I didn't want one. I started skipping family dinners, birthdays, holidays, anything that would have put me in the same room with her. I couldn't pretend. Not after that. The only person who truly showed up for me was Katie, my best friend. One night, curled up on her couch with a bottle of wine between us, it all came pouring out. "I don't know what hurts more," I said, my voice breaking. "That Madison did this to me, or that my parents believed her without question." Katie didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix it. She just listened, nodding gently, her hand wrapped around mine. "It's like everything I've done, everything I've tried to be, just doesn't matter. They'll always choose her." Katie gave my hand a squeeze, her voice soft but unwavering. "You didn't deserve any of this, Sam. You did something kind. And they chose not to see it. That's not on you. That's on them." And for the first time, I started to believe she might be right. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. My heart thudded hard against my ribs as Madison's name flashed across the top of the message. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, not since everything had blown up. Not since she took what I did in silence and turned it into her own success story. She had paraded around like the golden child while I was cast as the jealous, bitter sister. And now, out of nowhere, she was texting me? I hesitated, then opened the message. "We need to talk. It's about the money. Call me." Just 6 words. But they hit like a punch to the chest. The money. So she knew. Or at least, she thought she knew something. Maybe someone was asking questions. Maybe her story was beginning to crack. Or maybe, just maybe, the guilt was finally starting to sink in, though with Madison, that seemed unlikely. I read the message again, then again, my fingers trembling slightly. After all this time, months of silence, months of being painted as the villain, this was her first contact. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the car. But more than anything, I just wanted the truth to finally matter. And as much as I hated to admit it, this might be it. This could be the moment I'd been waiting for. It wasn't a confession, but it was a slip. A flicker of vulnerability. The first sign that the perfect little narrative Madison had built might be starting to fall apart. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think. Time to plan. I couldn't afford to get emotional, not now. If there was even a sliver of a chance to expose her lies, to finally reclaim my voice, I had to play it smart. I sat there in my parked car, staring at that message glowing on the screen. For months, I'd felt like I was screaming into a void, invisible to the people who were supposed to love me most. But now, maybe, just maybe, the silence was cracking. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It wasn't about reconciliation. It was about truth. And I wasn't going to let her control the story this time. "Hey Sam, I really need to talk to you. It's important." The message blinked back at me from my phone screen. My stomach twisted into knots, my emotions a volatile mix of anger, wariness, and reluctant curiosity. Madison hadn't contacted me in months. Not since the fallout. Not since she let me take the fall for her lie. The timing felt too perfect, too suspicious. Still, a tiny part of me, the part that still needed closure, couldn't help but wonder what she wanted now. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. Every instinct screamed to fire back immediately, to demand answers. But I didn't. Not this time. She'd manipulated the narrative for months, letting our parents believe whatever suited her best. She could wait. I set my phone down and walked away. By the next morning, after a night of tossing and turning and talking myself down from every possible scenario, I finally typed a reply. "What's so important, Madison? Make it quick. No pleasantries. No opening for guilt. I wasn't here to play nice." Her reply came back almost instantly, like she'd been sitting there, phone in hand, waiting for me. "Can I come over? I really need your help, Sam. I'm in a bad spot." The pleading tone was unlike her. Madison rarely asked for anything, especially not from me. I hesitated, eyes narrowing at the screen. What kind of help are we talking about? I wasn't about to open the door without knowing exactly what she was dragging in with her. Her response came fast again. "I'm drowning, Sam. I can't keep up with bills. I'm behind on rent, my cards are maxed, and I barely had enough for food." I didn't know who else to ask. "Please, just hear me out." I let out a low, bitter laugh. The golden girl, the family's pride, was now begging me for help. The same sister who let me sit through dinner after dinner being called a liar. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely. Let her feel the weight of her choices. But another part, the one that still craved some kind of justice, knew this could be the moment I'd been waiting for. "Fine," I typed back. "Come over tomorrow. We'll talk." If she wanted help, she'd have to earn it. My terms. My pace. The next afternoon, Madison knocked at my door. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't look like Madison. Her hair was tied up in a haphazard bun, her skin pale, tired. She wore a faded hoodie I hadn't seen in years, sleeves pushed up, hands tucked deep into the front pocket like she was bracing for a storm. I almost felt something, pity, maybe. But I shook it off. She stepped in slowly, not looking me in the eye, and settled uneasily on the edge of my couch. "I didn't know where else to go," she murmured, her voice thin. I stayed standing, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. She fidgeted with her fingers, not meeting my gaze. "Everything's falling apart. Rent's overdue, I can't pay off my credit cards, and I'm behind on groceries. I've tried everything, Sam. I don't know what to do." I exhaled through my nose, keeping my expression flat. "So, let me get this straight, you're here to ask me for money?" I asked bluntly, no sugarcoating. She flinched slightly, but nodded. For once, Madison didn't have a polished excuse. And I wasn't about to offer her one. She flinched, but she didn't argue. "After everything you've done," I said, my voice low and sharp, "you really think I'm just going to bail you out?" The room fell into a heavy silence. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, desperate. "I've already asked everyone else, Sam," she said, her voice fragile. "Friends, acquaintances, anyone I could think of. I didn't want to drag Mom and Dad into it, and I knew I couldn't go to the rest of the family after." Her voice trailed off, her gaze dropping to her hands. I crossed my arms and raised an eyebrow. "After what? After lying to them for months about something you didn't do?" She winced but said nothing. "So let me get this straight," I continued. "You've burned every bridge, exhausted every option, and now I'm the last person left? The sister you lied about? The one you left to take the fall? She nodded slowly, almost shamefully. I know I don't deserve it, she whispered. But I didn't know where else to go. Please, Sam. I'm begging you. I just stood there for a beat, staring at her, this hollow version of the confident, untouchable sister I'd grown up with. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to slam the door shut and never look back. But another part of me saw something else, the moment I'd been waiting for. Not revenge. Just resolution. I took a deep breath and shook my head. No, Madison. Her head jerked up. Her eyes widened. I'm not giving you money, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. Not after everything you did. She looked like she might break. Sam, please, she said, her voice cracking. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't desperate. I'm sure you are, I replied. But you made those choices. You lied to our parents. You let me be the villain so you could be the golden girl. And now you want help? That's not how this works. I didn't move. I didn't soften. Madison stared at me for a long moment. Her shoulders slowly slumped as the reality settled in. She rose, grabbing her bag with unsteady hands. I get it, she murmured, her voice brittle. I messed up. I don't deserve your help. I just didn't know where else to go. At the door, she paused and turned back to me. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. I'm sorry, Sam. For everything. Her voice cracked on the last word. Before I could respond, she stepped outside and closed the door behind her, quietly, like she didn't want to leave an echo. I stood there, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. I didn't feel triumphant. Just tired. Maybe a little relieved. But I knew I'd done the right thing. A few days later, I was halfway through making coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. Dad. He rarely called directly. My stomach tensed. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up. Hey, Dad, I said, trying to sound casual, even as my pulse picked up. The room went still. Like the air had been sucked out in an instant. For a moment, no one said a word. My mother froze, her hand still on Madison's back. My grandparents sat wide-eyed, blinking in disbelief. My father looked at me, then back at Madison, trying to process what he'd just heard. And me? I stayed silent. My hands were resting calmly in my lap, but inside, my heart was pounding. Madison's face was streaked with tears, her voice still shaky as she continued. I knew she gave it. I found out almost right away. But I didn't say anything. I let everyone believe it was me. She let out a broken laugh, bitter and ashamed. And then when everyone started praising me, I didn't correct them. I didn't think it would go this far. But it did. And now everyone hates her, and it's my fault. My mother's mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came out. Why, my dad finally asked, his voice low. Why would you do that? Madison wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, her shoulders still trembling. I don't know. I wanted to be the one who saved the day for once. I wanted the approval. I didn't expect it to hurt her this much. I didn't expect it to hurt me this much. My grandmother let out a soft gasp, and my grandfather just shook his head, visibly stunned. I looked at my parents then. Their eyes were on me now, wide with realization, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite name. I held their gaze for a moment before finally speaking, my voice quiet but clear. I never wanted the recognition. I just wanted to help. But when Madison let everyone believe the lie, and you all believed her without question, that hurt more than anything else. There was a pause. Then my mother reached for me across the table, her face stricken with remorse. Samantha. I'm so sorry. My dad's expression was unreadable, but I could see it, the cracks. The understanding dawning, the shame beginning to settle. I tried to speak up once, I said, my voice steady now, but I realized it didn't matter. Because the truth didn't look like Madison. It looked like me, and you didn't want that version. Madison sat curled in on herself, crying quietly. And for once, I didn't feel small next to her. I felt seen. No one cheered. No one clapped. But in that heavy, hushed moment, I felt something shift. And that was enough. She paused, breathing hard, her hands trembling as she searched for words. I took the credit because I wanted to feel more loved. More important. I've never felt like I was in anyone's shadow, not really, but Mom and Dad always protected me, always praised me. And I guess I got used to that. But when I saw what Samantha did, it was so selfless, so big, and I was jealous. Her voice cracked as she looked at our parents, her expression hollow and filled with regret. I wanted to be seen that way. Like I was capable of doing something meaningful. I didn't think about how much it would hurt her, or what it would do to us as a family. I just wanted to hold on to that feeling. I wanted to be the one you were proud of. She turned toward me then, finally meeting my eyes. Her voice collapsed into a whisper. I'm sorry, Sam. You didn't deserve this. I was selfish. And I let it spiral because I was scared of losing everything. Her shoulders shook as she buried her face in her hands, breaking down completely. The room was dead silent, too stunned for anyone to speak. As she spoke, I sat frozen, my heart pounding beneath the numbness. A dozen emotions collided inside me: anger, disbelief, relief, grief. It was all there, tangled and raw. Hearing her finally admit the truth after so long should have felt like justice. But instead, it left a hollow ache in my chest. It didn't undo the damage. I looked at my parents. They were pale, speechless, their gazes jumping between me and Madison like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Their faces looked like they were unraveling, piece by piece. And though part of me expected to feel vindicated watching them realize how badly they'd misjudged me, I didn't. Not really. All I could feel was the weight of everything I'd lost while they believed someone else's version of me. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say, I told you so. This was Madison's mess to sit in. Her words filled the room like fog, heavy and inescapable. Let her carry it for once. My mom finally spoke, her voice fragile and tight. Samantha. I don't even know what to say. Her eyes welled with tears. We were so quick to assume the worst. We thought you were just being petty or dramatic. We never stopped to think that maybe you were telling the truth all along. My dad gave a small nod, his face stricken. We shut you down. We let you carry that pain alone. I don't know how we missed it, but I'm so sorry, Sam. We let you down in every way. They both looked shattered. My mom reached across the table, her hand trembling as she reached for mine. We failed you, she whispered. We believed what was easy instead of what was right. And we're so sorry. Can you ever forgive us? Their words should have offered some comfort, but all I felt was a deep, aching exhaustion. Sadness hung over me like fog, thick and hard to shake. They were sorry now, but the damage was already done. I glanced toward my grandparents. Their silence said more than words ever could. My grandmother sat still, lips pressed tightly together, her eyes shining with unshed tears as she stared at her hands. My grandfather shook his head slowly, disappointment and heartbreak etched into every line of his face. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. They couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Days passed, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything: Madison's tearful confession, my parents' belated apologies, the haunted look in my grandparents' eyes. It all looped like a film I couldn't turn off. And then I thought about Madison. Really thought about her. Not the version I'd been angry at for months, but the person I saw that day, raw, regretful, and, for once, real. She had made a mess of everything, yes. But she was finally trying to own it. And maybe that meant something. Not enough for a clean slate. Not yet. But maybe enough to try something different. So I called her. Madison, I said, keeping my tone steady, I've made a decision. I'm going to help you, but not with money. I'm not going to bail you out. What I will do is sit down with you, help you sort through your finances, and figure out a plan to get back on your feet. But only if you're serious about it. No lies. No shortcuts. There was a pause on the other end before she responded. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Okay, she said. I want to try. It wasn't forgiveness. Not completely. But it was something. A first step. And surprisingly, it felt good. For the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. The resentment hadn't vanished, and the pain didn't magically go away, but it no longer ruled me. I had stood my ground. Found my voice. Chosen peace, not for anyone else, but for me. And that, finally, was enough.